what does the Buckeyes defense need to worry about with this Spartans team? Apathy. I mean, they're terrible. They're awful. They've kind of bounced around in terms of the quarterbacks that they're playing. Noah Kim got the first chance, and Noah Way, that just didn't work out. Caden Hauser's played a lot. I mean, they're making some decisions on what they want to do about Sam Levitt. Nobody is really lighting the world on fire. Levitt is like a 65% passer, but he's only had 23 attempts. So you look at Hauser, who his 59 completion percentage is a little better than Noah Kim's 57%. They've got a decent enough running back in Nate Carter, but honestly, he's not going to be able to get out there and do the things that Monungai was able to do for Rutgers. They're not the same type of back, and Carter has 156 carries to 4 touchdowns, averaging about 73 yards a game. In terms of receiver, their best receiver now plays at Florida State. Makes you just kind of wonder about that system for what they've been doing for years and years. Montori Foster Jr., I mean, he's a good enough receiver, 33 receptions, 436 yards, but only has 2 touchdowns. I don't see this being a team that's going to have a ton of trick plays. This isn't D'Antonio. I'm sure there's somebody on the staff that's creative. I mean, Ohio State did get burnt by the double hike play by Rutgers, something that I've never seen before. I don't think we're going to see a Little Giants type of situation in this game, but
not going to fall for the banana in the tailpipe.
Yeah, I think that the biggest concern is just, going in and saying, well, we already have this game won. Well, I know it and you know it and we all know it. You can't go out there and believe it at that moment. You got to go out and do your 111th and all the other rallying cries that we've heard through multiple administrations around here. But no, just no.
I'm going to be a little harsh. I think that the team laid down after this second win. The university came out and suspended Mel Tucker. You can debate that was the right thing to do. I think they made the conscious decision that they wanted to be done with Mel Tucker and didn't want another Larry Nassar type scandal on their hands, and decided that they were going to sacrifice this football season to rid themselves of Mel Tucker. They'll go out in December and get them the shiniest, nicest, newest version of PJ Fleck type guy to come in and take it, into the future and, energize it a little bit. They're going to be in the courts with Mel Tucker for the next 5 years, probably fighting over the remnants of that. If he coached there, this was his third or fourth year, figure they probably still owed him $60 million of that $90 million that he signed for. They're going to be arguing over that in court for about 5 years unless they come to some kind of agreement on that. And I'm not even sure they were on solid ground with what they did, even though they think they were. Seems to me the players did not think they were on solid ground because they went out and promptly laid down against Washington 41-7, laid down against their rival Michigan 49-0. Nearly beat Rutgers 27-24, lost at the end. And then here's Nebraska last week. 5 wins, playing for a bowl game, playing for the lead in the Big Ten West. And they go to Michigan State and they lose 20-17. How the hell does that happen? A win-starved program like Nebraska, tells me there is something there at Michigan State. But to expect them to come into Columbus, this is the third current national top 5 opponent for them this season. And, does Ohio State beat them 49-0 like Michigan did? I doubt it, but the line is like 31, I guess. And, anything like 45-7 or 45-14, nothing would be a surprise to me.
I don't know if people realize that Michigan State is the lowest scoring team in the Big Ten. And I think everybody just assumed that's Iowa, but it's actually Michigan State. They can't run the ball. I think they're second to last in the Big Ten in running. Against Washington this year, they posted 261 yards of total offense. Against Michigan, 182 yards of total offense. So I think that's probably what you'll expect against Ohio State. And they can't run the ball. They don't throw it well enough to stay consistent. It's just not a good offense. And so Ohio State shouldn't need to do too many fancy things, but they could fancy it up and make things even worse. But that may also be how they give up some big plays. And that's the one thing they don't want to do right now is give up big plays. So I think that 31 points or whatever it is, that's a lot, or whatever the line is. I'm not going near that, but this is not, I don't think this is going to be a game in any way. And it may even be one of these 20-7 ugly games that is the score is closer, but the game was never actually close types of things. Although Ohio State should definitely score more than 20 points. If they don't, then maybe it's because they rested all of those guys that we said they shouldn't rest.
Just jump into the other side of the ball really quick. Something that jumps out on the score sheet from the Nebraska game is that Michigan State had 7 sacks and 12 tackles for loss. And that's kind of going to be the big equalizer right there, is if Ohio State's offensive line takes a step backward, or Kyle can't get through his progression quickly enough and holds on to the ball too long. That's where silly things can happen at that point. But if Michigan State is going to do anything, in my opinion, it is going to be all predicated by what its defense is going to be able to do. And Ohio State needs to regain some of its passing prowess, because while this is not the worst secondary in college football like it was 2 years ago, it's still pretty poor. And Ohio State should have a lot of opportunities with the vertical passing game, but it's all going to start with what happens up front.
That Nebraska game is such a complete outlier in terms of the tackles for loss, because like you said, there are 12 tackles for loss there. And here's what they did in all of their other Big Ten games, including the Washington game, in terms of how many tackles for loss they had. 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 5. So they've kind of ramped up a little bit, but they had 14 total in the 3 games prior to having 12 against Nebraska. So I view that more as a Nebraska thing than a Michigan State thing, but also Ohio State's offensive line isn't so flawless that they can't have issues themselves.
I didn't watch that game. I try to be kind to myself, so I didn't watch that game, that Michigan State-Nebraska game, but I did flip by it a few times and catch a play here and a play there, and I did see this. I think it was Foster that made the great catch in the end zone, so I'm going to asterisk that and give him a gold star for Michigan State making one highlight play on offense. But, yeah, Heinrich Harburg's a guy that doesn't know what he's doing back there, and he's a mobile guy and runner, so you would think, well, they wouldn't get tackles for loss and sacks, but he holds the ball so long. In Nebraska, 28 pass attempts, and that's only because they were down 10 points in the fourth quarter. Before that, they were running it left and right. So those tackles for losses and sacks are even magnified by the style of play they were up against to a certain extent. But
even the sacks, 7 sacks. And in those same games I mentioned, Washington and the rest of their Big Ten games, they had a total of 8 sacks. So, Harburg can get out of trouble, but I think he thinks that he can get out of all trouble, and he can't. And I think that was probably evident there, though. I tried to watch some of the first quarter yesterday, and I honestly don't know how much of it I made through.
It was gross. Harburg gets out of trouble to run into more trouble.
Yeah.
And, somebody jumped in to talk about that they're 57th in pass defense. I'm not as concerned about the amount of yards that they've allowed. I don't have their passing efficiency defense numbers in front of me at the moment. I guess I could get them if I wanted to. But it is a defense that can be a sieve at times. And I'm also not going to allow myself to get too caught up in the numbers, because outside of just a couple teams in the Big Ten is pretty poor this year. If we're being honest with ourselves, just the teams that they're going to get in crossover from the West to begin with, and then just on top of that, there are teams in the East that I wouldn't necessarily say are are fantastic throwing the ball.
Yeah, Michigan State is 82nd in pass efficiency defense. Where teams are in passing yards allowed is generally not a meaningful statistic unless they're towards the bottom, and then it's like, why are you giving up so many yards? And sometimes it's because nobody can run on them, and because their opponents are always losing, so you're going to throw for a bunch of yards just because they're playing prevent defense against you. But Michigan is not. Michigan State's defense is not great. Their offense is not great, and like Steve said, it's just right now is the best time to play them because you're ready to just run out the stretch. Like if there were September call-ups, they'd call them up now and just play them, and the veterans would go on vacation, go on their golfing tours.
I wonder who they're going to get. Wonder who's going to end up as the head coach there. I haven't heard a lot. If Narduzzi in Pittsburgh weren't completely in the tank, maybe they'd take him. But
I think there's a ton of good options in the Big 12, honestly, like in terms of the Kansas and the Kansas State or Mike Elko at Duke. There are some guys that are Sparty-like that are like D'Antonio, who can take a program, build a program, and who will stay there and love it and nurture it and just not try to
monetize and leave. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think culture builders, program builders are out there. I think there's some good coaches out there, and they have the money to go get one of those. As we've seen the money that they threw at Mel Tucker. So they've got a war fund, if you will.
I mean, I thought Urban was going there.
Well, that's true. That's true.
If they moved it to Gainesville, Florida, he probably would. Or West Palm Beach. West Palm Beach, probably more likely now.
Another note on these two divisions, of course, we got two more. So the history of the two divisions has been obviously the cream of the crop of the East has been untouchable by the West, but the West has played even or better throughout the top to bottom. It's really close all time. It's like a 13-game difference midway through this season, but Wisconsin loses to Indiana, and of course that Michigan State-Nebraska game. If Rutgers goes to Iowa City this week and wins that game, which they're only a 1-point dog in that game, then that's going to be the capper that, can we just play a rematch of a Big Ten Eastern Division setup between the three at the top who have now won 41 consecutive games against the rest of the conference?
The Big Ten West champion should not be allowed within 500 feet of Lucas Oil Stadium, period. They can work the far lots. They can be the guys out there like conducting traffic. They can still get their little swag bag and everything else. But this, I mean, if there is any justice, as Tony Petitti is out there doling out justice, the final piece of justice would be getting rid of divisions today.